the word bias can mean quite a few different things. So I actually went back and then looked it up. So biases can be innate and they can be learned. And biases can be in science and in engineering. And in science and engineering, they can be a systematic error. And they can be in research, and how does a bias affect research and the results of research, and how does that affect actual funding and what gets delivered at a community level? And bias, I then went on to think of, wait, bias can be about the material, the bias of a material, and how something can be cut on the bias, and how when it's cut on the bias, it flows differently. And then it took me to thinking about, oh, wait a minute, there's bias binding, and how bias binding is actually the really simple thing that somehow makes everything hold together and look better. And so I took my journey of thinking about what is a bias across all those different meanings, knowing full well that what they meant was, what does a bias mean? It's about that that way that you can have both learnt or innate that makes you judge something. And I guess what I also noticed, it says one of the things I looked up, it said people may develop biases for or against an individual, a group, or a belief. And I actually thought bias is sometimes unconscious. Sometimes you don't know it's there. And that's the tricky thing, because I think if you can have an awareness of what your personal biases are. So as a practitioner, I do a lot of reflective practice. What's happened for me during that day? How have I approached it? What could I have done differently? Would I have done the same? But knowing that I did my best at that moment in time, whatever I did my best. And but kind of drilling down into what your own biases are. So for me, my bias, I'm quite clear about what my biases are in some areas. My biases come from the theory of the ecological practice in the child, which is Bronfenbrenner's model, which places the child at the center of a circle. And then around that child, you have the family, and then around that child, you have the extended family, and then around that, you have all the community services or things that exist, like, schools, childcare centres, shops, all the other things that exist in the community that help raise up that child. But for me, my bias is always towards the child.